Hey guys, welcome to BudgetEDH. On this week's episode, we bring you Kelsien the Plague out of Commander 2020. Kelsien is red, white, and a black Mardu for a legendary creature human assassin. It has vigilance and haste. Kelsien the Plague gets +1/+1 for each experience counter you have, and you can tap Kelsien. It deals 1 damage to target creature you don't control. When that creature dies this turn, you get an experience counter. All prices in this video are powered by TCGPlayer. If you guys are going to be shopping on TCGPlayer, it would mean the world to me if you guys would use my affiliate link, which I'll put up on the screen right now, and it will also be in the show notes down below. It doesn't cost you anything, but it does help the channel out quite a bit if you use that affiliate link. Kelsien is a great creature for controlling the board. He deals damage to our opponent's creatures, and if they die at the end of the turn, you get an experience counter, making Kelsien bigger. Kelsien also has vigilance, making him a great attacker. You can attack in and then also use your ping ability at the end of turn or whenever you need to kill off a creature. We're going to focus heavily on that assassin theme, so I have a lot of creatures in here that can tap to deal damage to opponents' creatures or to players. And then we're going to focus on trying to get death touch onto our creatures so that it will kill the creatures with one shot. And that's going to send a lot of creatures to the graveyard and make Kelsien big. In addition, we're going to play more of a control style with this deck. There's a lot of disruption in here. We have 6 board wipes, most of which are one-sided, and we'll keep at least 1 creature on each side on the board. So you can keep Kelsien on the board at all times, have him ping creatures, and then make him very large. There's also a lot of single targeted removal. We can deal with a lot of our opponent's problematic permanents and different things. We can kind of set the tone for the game. And then at the very end of the video, there's a couple different win cons that we included in this deck that we will go over at the end of the video. Let's quickly go over some of the stats in this deck. So this deck has 9 ramp spells, all of which are mana rocks, and then we have 9 card draw spells. There's an asterisk there because 1 or 2 of those are tutors, but they do find you the cards that you're looking for, so we will include it into that category. There are 6 board wipes, which is quite a few. We are going to be playing more of a controlling style with this deck, so we do want a lot of board wipes in here. 17 single target removal spells, and there's an asterisk there because all of our assassins that we have in this deck are included into the single targeted removal category. We have 9 ways of giving our creatures death touch, and that's the main theme of this deck, is to give our pingers death touch so that we can kill all of our opponent's creatures. And then we have 8 assassins in this deck, so creatures that we can give death touch to, and they can ping our opponent's creatures and kill those creatures. There's also one that can deal with tap creatures as well in this deck. So first up, let's go over the ramp that we have in this deck. Since we are playing Mardu, we do have to focus on artifact ramp. So first up, we have Soul Ring. It taps for 2 generic mana. Felwar Stone taps for a mana of any color that a land an opponent controls could produce, and then Mind Stone taps for a colorless mana, or you can pay 1 and tap it, sack it to draw a card. Then we have all of the signets in our colors, Boros, Orzhov, and Rakdos. They all have pay 1, tap it to add 2 colors to your mana pool. And then we have Talisman of Conviction and Hierarchy. They both tap for a generic and then tap to add 2 different colors to your mana pool, but they do deal a damage to you. And then Savai Crystal's a new one out of Ikoria, taps to add Mardu to your mana pool, and it has cycling on it as well. The 2 mana costs and under mana rocks are the best, and we did include as many as we could. And then Savai Crystal's also good. It does have that cycling on it, so you can get rid of it if you don't need it later in the game. Next up, let's go over the draw that we include in this deck. Now, it is important in these colors to get some card draw. It isn't as plentiful as some of the other colors, so we did go with all the card draw that we can include in this deck. So we have Knight's Whisper. You draw 2 cards and you lose 2 life. Sign in Blood. Target player draws 2 cards and loses 2 life. And then Read the Bones. You get to scry 2 and then draw 2, lose 2. These are all really efficient ways of drawing some extra cards. They do deal some damage to you, but it doesn't really matter. Then we have Faithless Looting. Draw 2 cards, discard 2. It also has Flashback. Thrill of Possibility. You have to discard a card and then draw 2. And then Painful Truce is a really nice one in this deck. It has Converge. You draw X cards and you lose X life, where X is the number of colors of mana spent to cast a spell. So you can draw 3, lose 3, and that's a really great rate for 3 mana in this deck. Then we have a couple of tutors. Open the Armory is going to help us find all of our Death Touch equipment that we have in this deck, and then Diabolic Tutor helps you find any card in this deck. And then the absolute most powerful draw spell in this deck is Harvester of Souls. It's a creature that has Death Touch. Whenever another non-token creature dies, you may draw a card. And this deck is going to kill a lot of creatures over the course of the game, so you'll be able to draw a ton of cards off this card. So this is one of the more priority cards to get down as quickly as you can, so you can get a lot of card draw. Next up, let's go over all the interaction that we have in this deck, and there is quite a bit of interaction in here. We do want to control the board as much as we can and kill all of our opponent's creatures is the name of our game. So we have Swords to of Plowshares, it exiles a creature and its controller gains life equal to its power. Go for the Throat and Terminate are both 2-mana spells that help us destroy creatures. Dire Tactics is a new one out of Ikoria. It exiles target creature. If you don't control a human, you lose life equal to that creature's toughness. Well, Kelsien is a human, so that's not really a downside for us. And even if it was, it's still a great rate to kill a creature. Despark exiles a permanent with converted mana cost 4 or greater. One thing to note here, it's any permanent that you can get rid of with this card, making it very powerful. Mortify can destroy a creature or an enchantment. And then we have Generous Gift, which destroys a permanent. Its controller creates a 3/3 green elephant creature token. This is an extremely powerful card in any white deck that can use it. It is like Beast Within, but in white. Crackling Doom is an instant that deals 2 damage to each opponent, and then each opponent sacrifices a creature with the greatest power among creatures that player controls. The great thing about this card, even though you don't get to really pick which creature it destroys, it will kill the biggest creature on the board, which is great, and it only costs 3 mana to get rid of potentially 3 creatures. Chaos Warp is an instant. The owner of target permanent shuffles it into their library, then reveals the top card of their library. If it's a permanent card, they put it into the battlefield. So this will get rid of the worst permanent on the board that you currently see. Sometimes this can be really bad, and you can get a very problematic permanent off the top, like an Omniscience or something. I've seen that happen. The chances of that happening are pretty slim. Then we have Bedevil. It's an instant, destroy target artifact, creature, planeswalker, and then Utter End exiles any target non-land permanent. So we have a lot of ways of dealing with different permanents in this deck. Not only just creatures, but also any other permanent that you might face. This deck has a really easy time of getting rid of those permanents. Next, we're going to talk about all the board wipes that we have in this deck, and a lot of them are one-sided, or they keep at least one creature around, which is what we want with Kelsien on the board. So first up, we have Mythos of Snapdecks. It's a new one out of Ikoria. Each player chooses an artifact, creature, enchantment, and planeswalker from among the non-land permanents they control, then sacrifices the rest. If you paid Mardu to cast this spell, you choose the permanents for each player instead. Making this a very powerful card, you get to choose all of your opponent's things that they get to keep, and guess what? You're going to choose all the worst stuff for them. Divine Reckoning is a board wipe that each player chooses a creature they control and then destroys the rest. So you would choose Kelsien and then kill everything else, and then they would do the same with their creatures as well. Single Combat, each player chooses a creature or planeswalker they control, then sacrifice the rest. Players can't cast creature or planeswalker spells until the end of your next turn. This is a very powerful one that I've been including in a lot of my white decks recently. That extra part on that card where they can't cast creatures, planeswalker spells until your next turn is just really great. I think this card should be played a little bit more often. It is very powerful for only a 5-mana board wipe. It does leave around 1 creature on each side, but that's not really a huge downside, especially in this deck where you have Kelsien and you can just kill it anyway, or other single targeted removals as well. Next up, we have Cleansing Nova. This is one way of getting rid of artifacts and enchantments if you need to, but it also destroys all creatures as well. So I like the flexibility in this card. If you need to get rid of some problematic artifacts and enchantments, you can do that. If you just need to reset the board completely, you have that option as well for a 5-mana board wipe. It's a great card. Chandra's Ignition is one of the ways you can actually win the game. So it's a sorcery. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to each other creature and each opponent. So with Kelsien and you're killing a bunch of creatures over the course of the game, I'll show you a lot of ways that you can do that with him. You can make him extremely big with all those experience counters that he has, and you can change his ignition and wipe the board and kill all your opponents at one time. Ruinous Ultimatum's a really great one out of Ikoria. It's brand new. Destroy all non-land permanents your opponents control. It does cost 7 mana, and they're all colored pips, making it very difficult to cast, but if you do cast this, it's going to really set your opponents back, and you should win the game at that point. Next up, let's go over some of the assassins that we have in this deck. And by assassin, I mean pingers that we can put Death Touch onto and kill creatures. So first up, we have Goblin Sharpshooter. It's probably the best one in this deck. It doesn't untap during your untap step. Whenever a creature dies, untap Goblin Sharpshooter, and you can tap it, and it deals 1 damage to target creature or player. I've seen this thing go off, and if you give this thing Death Touch, it will literally kill any creature that you want on the board. There's an equipment that has a similar ability in this deck that will be able to give this same trait to Kelsien and our other pingers to be able to kill all of our opponent's creatures in one shot. So next up, we have Blood Cultist. It taps to deal 1 damage to target creature, and whenever a creature is dealt damage by Blood Cultist this turn, is put into the graveyard, put a +1/+1 counter on Blood Cultist. So this is similar to Kelsien. It's going to get bigger whenever creatures are dealt damage and die by Blood Cultist in a turn. Volshock Sorcerer has haste, and you can tap it to deal 1 damage to target creature or player. Then we have Cunning Spark Mage, has the same exact text on it, also costs the same amount of mana. And then Royal Assassin is a little bit different. It taps to destroy target tap creature. So we have some ways of tapping down our opponent's creatures in this deck as well, and then Royal Assassin can come in and just kill them. Next up, we're going to talk about all the ways that we're able to give our creatures death touch, so that way our assassins, aka pingers, are able to kill all of our opponent's creatures. So first up, we have some equipment. We have Gorgon's Head, equipped creature gains death touch. Basilisk Collar has the same text but also gives lifelink, and then Gorgon Flail also gives death touch but also gives +1/+1 as well. And these all have really low equip costs of only 2, making them very powerful equipment. Then we have Quietus Spike, also has the same text on it, give a creature death touch, and then whenever it deals combat damage to a player, that player loses half of his or her life rounded up. This is a very powerful card with Kelsien because not only does it give your creature death touch, but if they deal combat damage to a player, they also lose half their life, making this a very powerful card. Retreat to Haggard is an enchantment that has landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, choose one. Target creature gets +1/+0 and gains death touch until end of turn. Each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. The only thing that you really care about is the death touch with this card, but if you don't have a creature on the board, it's nice that you have another option as well. Onyx Mage is a creature that you can pay 1 and a black. Target creature you control gains death touch until end of turn. Void Beckoner is a big giant creature nightmare horror with death touch. You don't care about that, you really care about the cycling part. 2 and a black. When you cycle it, put a death touch counter on target creature you control. Death Pits of Wrath is very similar. Whenever a creature is dealt damage, destroy it. It can't be regenerated. This will give your creature pseudo death touch. The one downside with this is it gives it to every single creature on the board. So if your opponents have a pinger, they'll be able to kill some stuff too. Or if they deal some combat damage to creatures, they'll kill them as well. Archetype of Finality is a creature that gives creatures you control death touch, and then also creatures your opponents control lose it and can't have or gain it. So that's kind of nice as well. Next up, let's go over some of the equipment that we have in this deck. There's a couple of equipment that give us some different utility in the game. So first up, we have Whisper Silk Cloak. Equipped creature can't be blocked and has Shroud. So this is great if you get this on Kelsien. You can swing in, your opponents will not be able to block him. He's going to be really large. You can get in for that commander damage, and it also gives him protection as well. It's a very powerful equipment. It's one of the ones that I would try to find first after getting that death touch onto Kelsien. Next up, we have Nico T. It's an old one out of Betrayers of Kamigawa. Whenever a equipped creature deals damage to a creature, tap that creature. As long as Nico T remains in play, that creature doesn't untap during its controller's untap step. Whenever a equipped creature deals damage to a player, that player loses 1 life. So this is great with something like Royal Assassin on the battlefield. You can use your Kelsien to deal a damage to a creature. It taps and stays tapped, and then Royal Assassin can just kill it. So you can kill a lot of your opponent's creatures this way. Then we have Thornbite Staff. This is the way of giving your creatures Goblin Sharpshooter's ability on it. So it's an artifact. Equipped creature has pay 2 and tap it. This creature deals 1 damage to target creature or player, and whenever a creature is put into a graveyard from play, untap this creature. And then it has whenever a shaman comes into play, you can attach Thornbite Staff. We don't care about that part. But if you can kill creatures with Thornbite Staff attached to your creature, like let's just say Kelsien has Death Touch and Thornbite Staff on it, you can mow down and kill every single one of your opponent's creatures with this card and a Death Touch creature. Then we have Sunforger. This card's really great at finding your interaction pieces. So you can pay a red and a white and unattached Sunforger, search your library for a red or white instant card with converted mana cost 4 or less, and cast that card without paying its mana cost, then shuffle your library. This is a really powerful card. It will find you a lot of your important spells that you need in this deck. It can also find you stuff like Open the Armory, so you can get some more equipment with Sunforger out. And it also gives your creature +4/+0, so you can put this on Kelsien and start getting the beats on real quick. Next up, let's go over some ways that we're able to get our opponent's creatures back. So we want some ways, after we kill all of our opponent's creatures, of being able to get those creatures back onto the battlefield and get them under our control. So there are a couple of spells in the game that will allow us to do that. So first up, we have one out of Battle Bond. It's Thrilling Encore. It's an instant. Put onto the battlefield under your control all creature cards in all graveyards that were put there from the battlefield this turn. So if you have a way of killing all of your opponent's creatures, let's just say something like a board wipe, or you have Goblin Sharpshooter with Death Touch on it and you kill all your opponent's creatures, you can then Thrilling Encore, put them all into the battlefield under your control, and then really go to town. Command the Dreadhorde is similar. It's a sorcery. Choose any number of target creature and or planeswalker cards in graveyards. Command the Dreadhorde deals damage to you equal to the total converted mana cost of those cards. Put them onto the battlefield under your control. The one downside here is this one can deal you quite a bit of damage, so you want to make sure that you're really picking and choosing the ones that you want. Then we have Athreos Shroud Veiled. It's a legendary enchantment creature with indestructible indestructible. As long as your devotion to white or black is less than 7, it's not a creature. At the beginning of your end step, put a coin counter on another target creature. Whenever a creature with a coin counter on it dies or is put into exile, return that card to the battlefield under your control. So this is really nice. You can put coin counters on your opponent's creatures, kill them, get them back onto the battlefield under your control. And it is nice if they actually go into exile, you'll get them as well. Grave Betrayal is similar. Whenever a creature you don't control dies, return it to the battlefield under your control with an additional +1/+1 counter on it at the beginning of the next end step. That creature is a black zombie in addition to its other colors and types. So again, this is another way you kill your opponent's creatures, they come back to the battlefield under your control, and they are zombies now. We'll go over a couple of cards that give us some utility in this deck. So first up, we have Mother of Ruins. It's a creature. You can tap it. Target creature you control gains protection from the color of your choice until end of turn. This is a nice way of giving your creatures protection, and you're mostly going to use this on Kelsien so that your opponents can't kill it. General's Enforcer is a creature that legendary humans you control have indestructible, and you can pay for exile target card from a graveyard. If it was a creature card, create a 1/1 white human soldier creature token. Cool thing about this is not only is it going to give Kelsien indestructible, which is important because you want him to stick around, it also gives you a way to get some tokens onto the board. You can kill all your opponent's creatures, exile them, and then make tokens out of them. Sun Titan is a creature that whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, you may return target permanent card, convert a mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. This is just a really great card to accrue some value over the course of the game. If your equipments get destroyed, you can get them back with Sun Titan. You can also get lands back from your graveyard, put them back onto the battlefield. He's just a great all-around creature to have in any white deck. Next up, we have a couple of creatures that are going to help us deal some additional damage to our opponents and also creatures when you use your pingers. So first up, we have Torbrand, Thane of Redfell. If a red source you control would deal damage to an opponent or a permanent an opponent controls, it deals that much damage +2 instead. And then we have Obosh, the Prey Piercer. It has, if a source you control with an odd converted mana cost would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals double that damage to that permanent or player instead. The great thing about this is not only is Kelsien an odd converted mana cost, but all of our pingers have odd converted mana costs in this deck. They all cost 3 mana, so this will be able to deal 2 damage to all of our opponent's creatures or to players, and can give us a way of closing out the game a lot quicker when we deal damage with Kelsien. We start attacking as well. So last but not least, let's talk about the win cons that we have in this deck. Now, the main win con is just attacking with Kelsien and getting that commander damage in. I think that's the primary way to win in this deck. But if that falls through, we do have a couple of potential ways of winning the game. So first up is Blood Artist. It's 1 and a black for a creature. Whenever a Blood Artist or another creature dies, target player loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Now, this is important because it will trigger off of any creature dying. So a lot of the Aristocrats builds have those creatures that whenever a creature you control dies, will be able to drain your opponent for 1. But this is one of the few cards that triggers off of any creature dying. So this is the most important one to have in your deck, especially since we don't have a whole lot of creatures anyway. We want to be able to deal damage whenever our opponent's creatures dies, because we're going to be killing them very frequently. And then we have Revel in Riches. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, create a colorless treasure artifact token with tap, sacrifice this artifact, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 10 or more treasures, you win the game. So this can win you the game. The only downside with this is you do have to wait until your next upkeep, making this a pretty great removal target for any of your opponents. They're not going to sit around and let you win the game, but it is great because it will get you a lot of treasures too, and you can get a lot of mana off of those. Thank you so much for watching our video today. If you like this video and you want to see more budget commander content, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you can also check us out on patreon.com/BudgetEDH. There's a bunch of different tiers and ways to interact with us outside of YouTube. We'll see you guys next time.